Telecom TV. We're here at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, first day, St. Valentine's Day, the 14th of February, and this is our panel discussion on mHealth. Immediately on my right is Stephen Hope, who is from Docobo. Next to him, David Aylward, who's Executive Director. And last but by no means least, at the end there, on my far right, is David Height, Vice President of Business Development Emerging Devices at AT&T. Let's think about this, gentlemen, from the very beginning. Of the world's population, nearly two-thirds of the, 6 billion now, I think it is, of subscribers to mobile phones are in emerging economies. So mHealth, or the use of mobile devices for health purposes, can help governments and corporations and NGOs and citizens, etc., to deliver and to access and to use health information to promote well-being, to combat disease and respond to medical emergencies. What I'd like to know about really is, what's the real potential for mHealth behind the hype? What's the truth? Will it develop into a sustainable business in its own right, or will it just be an add-on to existing healthcare provisions and so on, and providers? Will it lead to technological advances, or are they already in place and this is just a mobilisation of them? What will the value chain look like? Who will be involved in the ecosystem and so on? So we're trying to find out what the true meaning of mHealth is and what we think the role is going to be. Let's begin at the beginning, and I'd like, actually, if I could, Stephen, to come to you first. Tell us what you think, or what you believe mHealth to be, and what state it's in at the moment.
Well, I believe that that there are many apps that everybody calls mHealth, and I think one of the issues are that they are potentially well-being applications rather than actual full end-to-end health. And I think that it's very important to think that behind the health app, as everybody does, the mHealth, there has to be a whole supporting infrastructure for the from right back to the clinician, for it to be truly for true health. And so I think there's a great opportunity for all the applications, but I think it has to be taken in the fact that you can't just do it by mobile phone alone. You have to have the whole end-to-end infrastructure in place.
There's nods up and down there. David, what do you say to that?
Absolutely. Our organization is focused on the developing world, and I think the answer to your question is different depending on whether you're in the developed world or the developing world. But in either case, Stephen's exactly right, that in order for mHealth to really achieve its possibilities, it needs to be part of a system, of a health system. In the developing world, there isn't much of a health system outside of the cities, and so you'll see that mHealth makes health possible for urban poor and rural areas. That doesn't mean it'll happen, but it makes it possible for the first time. There is not enough money in the world to build hospitals and clinics and train enough doctors and train enough nurses to have a Western model in the developing world. Plus, even if you had the money, you wouldn't want to copy the system we have in the Western world to begin with, at least in the United States. So there's a possibility, I think, to do what I would call distributed health, to get health where people are, and only bring them to the hospital when you need to bring them to the hospital. Yes. So that there's an ability to educate and provide information both to people and to partially trained healthcare providers, and back them up with an information system. Yeah. As to your other questions, we don't have answers to those. We're right at the beginning of the curve.
Okay. Dave, what do you say as a representative here of the network providers of this world? Where do you think mHealth is at?
I agree entirely that it's taking health to where people are. It's the mobility piece of it. And it's a full cycle. The ecosystem has to start where information needs to be gathered, and health information at where the patient is. And then that has to go back through the ecosystem and then distributed to all of the stakeholders and caretakers in that process, one of which may be back to that situation where the patient is, either to the patient themselves or to those caretakers. And so when you think of the ecosystem, it's very much a cycle. You know, that the information has to flow more than one direction. And right now, today, especially in the U.S., a lot of information flows one way. It flows to the, to the doctor or to the provider of insurance, and it doesn't flow back out back out to patients and to caretakers. And so, what we believe is what we are establishing is the ecosystem that gets information flowing full cycle, all the way around to all the stakeholders and shareholders in that.
What it allows you to do, though, is for example, one of the services that AT&T is offering in the U.S. is called WellDoc. And what they've done is to get some really first-class doctors from Johns Hopkins who know about diabetes, who can now treat people in real time, because they'll be getting information about the person's insulin level and where they are in real time, rather than 3 weeks later going in and saying, 3 weeks ago I felt bad, and and the doctor says, well, what did you eat? And they say, well, I don't remember. So what in my case, that means being able to diagnose somebody 20 kilometers outside of the city and say, you have diabetes, you need to come in, because you could take an insulin reading from them and transmit it in and read it with a computer. And use doctors for what we should use doctors for, which is the marginal calls. Most of medicine can be routinized. 10%, 20%, 30%, some percentage cannot be. And that's where we should focus the doctors, rather than, because today we have a model that you can't get health care unless you go visit a doctor. We can't afford that model, plus you don't need that model to have high-quality medicine.
I think there's the issue of what we are trying to do with our device, though, because we talked about the rural medicine. We're assuming that there's an infrastructure if you want real-time monitoring, but a lot of the telehealth is about long-term conditions, day by day, looking at trends, and not necessarily lots of data, but it has to be packaged into a medical record in such a way that the clinician can then look at that data, and then maybe there's alarms raised if things fall out of spec.
This is the key. When he said system before, this is a good example of that. Going in and doing episodic care misses those kinds of trends. And for example, in a slum in Dhaka, Bangladesh, people move around a lot, so they go to different clinics, and so that you don't get that pattern unless you have a medical record. And in the second clinic, they can call up your medical record. Well, go to the business model, who's most likely to be able to host that medical record? The wireless carrier.